The morning sun peeked through the airport windows as Marlene Johnson wheeled her carry-on luggage through the busy terminal. At 48, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from 2 decades of breaking barriers in the tech world. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her tailored navy suit was wrinkle-free despite her early morning rush to the airport. Flight 372 to San Francisco now boarding first class and priority passengers. The announcement echoed through the terminal as Marlene checked her watch. Perfect timing. She had just enough time to make a quick call before boarding. "Hey, I'm about to get on the plane," she said to her assistant on the other end. "Make sure everyone's ready for tomorrow's meeting. This airline deal is going to change everything for us." She ended the call and headed toward the gate, her mind already running through the presentation she would give to the airline executives. The $4 billion funding package from Quantum Innovations, her company, would help the airline replace their aging fleet with newer, more efficient planes. The gate agent smiled as she scanned Marlene's boarding pass. "Have a nice flight, Miss Johnson." Walking down the jet bridge, Marlene felt the familiar pre-meeting excitement. Quantum Innovations had grown from her tiny startup into a powerhouse under her leadership. This airline deal would be their biggest investment yet. She found her seat in first class, 3A, window seat, and placed her small leather bag in the overhead bin. After settling in, she pulled out her tablet to review some numbers before takeoff. Other passengers filed past her, filling the plane with the usual sounds of shuffling feet and quiet conversations. About 10 minutes later, while Marlene was deep in thought about profit projections, a shadow fell across her tablet. She looked up to see a flight attendant with a tight smile. "Excuse me," the attendant said, her voice carrying a hint of doubt. "Are you sure this is your seat?" Marlene blinked, momentarily confused by the question. "Yes, 3A. Here's my boarding pass." She pulled up the digital pass on her phone and showed it to the attendant. The attendant glanced at it quickly but didn't move away. "It's just that we have a situation with the seating arrangements. Could I see your ID as well?" A prickle of unease ran down Marlene's spine. She'd flown this airline dozens of times, but never had her presence in first class been questioned this way. Still, she kept her voice level as she handed over her driver's license. The attendant studied it for what felt like a long time, then handed it back with a frown. "I need to check something with my supervisor. Please wait here." The small room they took Marlene to had no windows and smelled of cleaning products. A single metal table sat in the middle with 3 chairs around it. The security officer pointed to one of them. "Wait here," he said, his voice flat. "A supervisor will be with you shortly." The door closed behind him with a click that echoed in the tiny space. Marlene stood for a moment, her heart still pounding in her chest, before slowly lowering herself into the chair. She placed her handbag on the table, hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the effort of containing her anger. Her phone buzzed inside her bag. She pulled it out to see 6 missed calls from her executive assistant, Lynn. The plane must have taken off by now. Marlene took a deep breath and called Lynn back. "Where are you?" Lynn's worried voice came through immediately. "The flight attendants wouldn't tell me anything. They just said you had to step off the aircraft." "They pulled me off the plane," Marlene said, keeping her voice steady. "Security is holding me in some room at the gate. No one's told me why yet." "What? That's crazy. Do you need me to get off too?" "No," Marlene said. "Stay on board. Someone needs to make it to that meeting. I'll figure something out from here." After hanging up, Marlene opened her email app and started typing furiously, documenting everything that had happened while it was still fresh in her mind. Times, names, exact words used, she recorded it all with the precision that had made her such a successful businesswoman. 20 minutes passed before the door opened again. A man in a different uniform entered, followed by the original security officer and a woman in a blazer with an airline logo. "Ms. Johnson," the woman said with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Diane from Customer Relations. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Marlene repeated, her voice cool. "I was publicly removed from a flight I had a valid ticket for. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination." The airline representative's smile faltered. "Our system flagged an irregularity with your booking. It's a rare technical glitch that." I've flown over 100,000 miles with your airline every year for the past decade, Marlene cut in. Never once has there been a glitch until today. The security supervisor cleared his throat. Ma'am, we were just following protocol. And what protocol is that exactly? To question only certain passengers about their first-class seats. Marlene's gaze was unwavering. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. The three airline employees exchanged glances. We apologize for any inconvenience, the customer relations woman finally said, sliding a folder across the table. We've booked you on the next flight to San Francisco in 3 hours. We've upgraded you to first class and included some travel vouchers for future trips. Marlene didn't touch the folder. 3 hours. The meeting I was heading to is worth billions of dollars to my company. And you think travel vouchers fix this? She stood up, gathering her things with deliberate calm. I'd like the names and employee IDs of everyone involved in this incident, including the flight attendant who first questioned me and whoever made the decision to call security. The airline staff shifted uncomfortably. That's not standard procedure, the supervisor began, but Marlene cut him off. Neither is removing a paying customer without cause. I'm sure your legal department would agree. She walked toward the door, then turned back. You should know that I'm the CEO of Quantum Innovations. We were about to finalize a $4 billion funding package with your airline tomorrow. Were. Their faces paled as the weight of her words sank in. Out in the terminal, Marlene found a quiet corner near her new gate. Her phone buzzed again with messages from her team. She ignored them for now, instead pulling up the contact information for her company's head of legal affairs. As travelers rushed past, some glancing curiously at the woman typing intently on her phone, none of them knew they were watching the beginning of what would become a corporate showdown. Marlene looked up at the departures board, watching as Flight 372, now without her on it, changed from departed to in air. She had 3 hours until her new flight. 3 hours to start putting together a plan that would change not just her day, but an entire industry's approach to something much more important than profit margins. By the time Marlene's new flight landed in San Francisco, her phone was buzzing nonstop. News traveled fast in business circles. Lynn had met her at the airport, concern written across her face. The airline sent this, Lynn said, handing Marlene a formal-looking envelope as they walked to the waiting car. It arrived by courier at the hotel an hour ago. Marlene opened it to find a typed letter with the airline's logo at the top. Her eyes scanned the page quickly. We deeply regret the unfortunate incident, she read aloud, her voice dripping with disbelief. Please accept these premium travel vouchers valued at $2,000 as a token of our goodwill. They can't be serious. The driver opened the car door for them, and once inside, Marlene tossed the letter onto the seat between them. They also sent flowers to your hotel suite, Lynn added, scrolling through her tablet. And the regional VP left 3 voicemails. Marlene looked out the window at the passing city. Have they released any public statement? Lynn tapped her screen a few times. Just this. It went out about an hour ago. She handed the tablet to Marlene, who read the airline's brief social media post. We are aware of a situation involving a passenger on Flight 372 this morning. We take all customer concerns seriously and are investigating the matter thoroughly. Sky United Airlines is committed to providing excellent service to all our passengers. A situation, Marlene repeated. That's what they're calling it. She handed the tablet back and pulled out her own phone. Get me a call with our PR team in 20 minutes, and I want a meeting with our research department tomorrow morning. The next day, Marlene sat at the head of the conference table in Quantum Innovations' San Francisco office. Around her were her most trusted team members, the head of research, the chief financial officer, the legal director, and several others. Spread across the table were printouts of dozens of social media posts, news articles, and formal complaints. What we found is disturbing, said the research head, a woman with short gray hair and glasses. In the past 2 years alone, there have been over 300 similar incidents reported on this airline. Passengers of color being questioned about their seating, removed from flights, or subjected to random security checks at rates far higher than white passengers. She slid a graph toward Marlene. The data speaks for itself. And those are just the reported cases. The legal director nodded. We've also pulled their diversity numbers. Less than 12% of their executive team comes from minority backgrounds, despite operating in some of the most diverse cities in the country. Marlene took it all in, her face a mask of calm despite the anger building inside her. On a screen at the end of the room, a news clip was playing silently, the airline's CEO giving a brief statement about isolated incidents and company values. "And what about our deal with them?" she asked, turning to her CFO. "The $4 billion funding package is ready to go. Papers need signing next week. Everything's in place, just as you directed before this happened." The room fell quiet as everyone looked to Marlene. They knew her not just as their boss, but as someone who had built this company from nothing, who had overcome countless barriers in an industry that hadn't always welcomed her. "Here's what we're going to do," she finally said, standing up. "We're going to hold that $4 billion over their heads like the sword of Damocles." She walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. "First, we draft a formal response declining their apology and vouchers. Second, we request a meeting with their CEO and board, not their PR people, not middle management. The people who can actually make decisions." She wrote these points on the board in clear, bold letters. "Third, we prepare our list of demands. Not requests, demands. Complete overhaul of their training, independent review board for discrimination complaints, new hiring practices, executive accountability metrics." The legal director raised an eyebrow. "And if they refuse?" Marlene capped the marker and turned to face her team. "Then we not only walk away from the deal, but we make sure every investor, every fund manager, and every business publication knows exactly why. We let the world see what happens when companies think diversity is just a buzzword they can ignore." She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "They pulled me off that plane thinking I was just another passenger they could push around. It's time they learned that some passengers can push back hard." The boardroom of Quantum Innovations fell silent as Marlene finished presenting the facts of her experience. The large windows behind her showed the San Francisco skyline, but no one was looking at the view. All eyes were fixed on their CEO. "So that's what happened," she said, clicking off the presentation. "Now we need to decide how to respond." The board members exchanged glances. These weren't just any business people, they were industry veterans who had backed Marlene from the early days when Quantum was just a startup working out of a tiny office. "The airline has violated our trust," said an older woman with silver-streaked hair. "But $4 billion is a lot of money to walk away from. The shareholders will have questions." Marlene nodded. "I understand the concerns, but this isn't just about one bad experience." She clicked to a new slide showing charts and data. "This is about a pattern of behavior that affects countless travelers, and about whether we want our money supporting a company with these practices." The chief financial officer, a man with round glasses and a serious expression, leaned forward. "From a purely business perspective, there's also risk in partnering with a company that has these issues. Their reputation problems could become our reputation problems." Heads nodded around the table. Reputation mattered, especially for a company like Quantum that prided itself on ethical innovation. "What exactly are you proposing?" asked the board chairman, a tall man with salt and pepper hair who had been quietly taking notes. Marlene took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define not just her response to what happened, but potentially her legacy as a CEO. "I want to use our position as a major investor to force real change," she said, her voice firm. "We don't just walk away. We tell them exactly what needs to happen before we'll consider putting our money on the table." She clicked to another slide showing a detailed plan. Complete overhaul of their training programs, hiring of diversity consultants with actual authority, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, and most importantly, executive-level accountability, bonuses tied to improvement metrics. A younger board member whistled softly. "That's asking a lot." "It's requiring what should already be standard," Marlene countered, "and we have the leverage to demand it." The room grew quiet again as everyone considered the implications. This wasn't just about one incident or one company anymore. It was about setting a precedent for how corporations could be held accountable. The chairman looked around the table. "I think we should hear from everyone. This is a significant decision." One by one, the board members spoke. Some expressed concerns about the financial implications, others about the media attention this might attract. But as the discussion continued, a consensus began to emerge. "When you first started this company," said one of the original investors, a woman who rarely spoke at meetings, "you talked about building technology that made the world better. Not just more profitable, but better. This feels like that same vision, just applied differently." Marlene felt a lump in her throat. She remembered those early pitch meetings, the skepticism she'd faced, and the few who had believed in her enough to invest. The chairman called for a vote. All in favor of supporting Marlene's plan to withhold funding pending these reforms. Hands rose around the table, first a few, then more, until every single board member had their hand up. Unanimous, the chairman announced, allowing himself a small smile. Quantum Innovations stands behind its CEO. As the meeting wrapped up, Marlene stayed behind, looking out at the city below. The decision had been made, but the hard part was still to come. Tomorrow, she would be walking into the airline's headquarters not as a wronged passenger, but as a powerful investor with billions in potential funding at stake. Her assistant poked her head in the door. "The airline CEO just confirmed the meeting for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Marlene nodded. "Thank you." "Are you nervous?" her assistant asked. Marlene thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "No. For the first time since this happened, I feel completely certain about what I'm doing." She gathered her things, ready to head home and prepare for tomorrow's confrontation. The airline had pulled her off a plane thinking she was powerless. Tomorrow, they would learn just how wrong they had been. The headquarters of Sky United Airlines towered over downtown, its glass exterior reflecting the morning sun. Marlene stepped out of her car, straightening her dark blue suit jacket. Lynn walked beside her, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. "They've gathered everyone you requested," Lynn said quietly as they crossed the plaza toward the entrance. "The CEO, the board members, their legal team. They've even flown in the head of customer experience from Chicago." Marlene nodded, her face calm but determined. "Good. This isn't a conversation I want to have twice." The security guard at the reception desk did a double take when Marlene gave her name. Word had clearly spread about who was coming and why. Within seconds, a nervous-looking woman in a crisp pantsuit appeared. "Ms. Johnson," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia, the CEO's executive assistant. They're waiting for you in the main boardroom." They'd followed Patricia across the gleaming lobby to a private elevator. As they rode up to the top floor, Marlene caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked exactly like what she was, a powerful executive about to conduct important business. Yet just 3 days ago, she had been treated like an unwelcome intruder on their plane. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area with wooden double doors ahead. Patricia led them through into a large boardroom where about 15 people sat around a massive table. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as Marlene entered. A tall man with perfectly coiffed gray hair stood up quickly from the head of the table. "Ms. Johnson," he said, coming around to shake her hand. "I'm Richard Wells, CEO of Sky United. Thank you for coming. We're deeply sorry about your experience with our airline." Marlene shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting on such short notice." Richard gestured to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from his own. "We've set a place for you there, if that's acceptable." Marlene smiled politely but shook her head. "Actually, I'd prefer to stand for the moment. I have a presentation to make." She nodded to Lynn, who connected a small device to the room's display system. Within seconds, Quantum Innovations' logo appeared on the large screen at the end of the room. "As you all know," Marlene began, her voice steady and clear, "Quantum Innovations has been planning to provide $4 billion in funding for your fleet modernization program. The contracts are drawn up and were scheduled to be signed next week." The airline executives leaned forward in their seats, some looking concerned, others trying to maintain poker faces. "What you may not realize," Marlene continued, clicking to a new slide showing statistics, "is that before making any major investment, my company conducts thorough research. Not just on financial stability, but on company culture and practices." The room grew tense as she moved through slides showing documented cases of discriminatory treatment of passengers, internal emails revealing dismissive attitudes toward complaints, and data showing how few people of color held leadership positions at the airline. When your security staff pulled me off that plane, Marlene said, pausing to look directly at the CEO, they didn't just humiliate one passenger. They exposed a problem that runs through your entire organization. A woman near the middle of the table, wearing an airline pin on her lapel, spoke up defensively. Ms. Johnson, we have diversity training programs in place. What happened to you wasn't isolated. It wasn't isolated, Marlene cut in, her voice still calm but firmer now. And your current programs clearly aren't working. She clicked to a new slide showing the headline of a business publication, Quantum Innovations Set to Finalize $4 billion Airline Deal. Right now, the business world is expecting this deal to go through. But here's what I came to tell you today. She clicked again, and the screen changed to a list of bullet points. These are our new terms. The executives exchanged worried glances as they read the demands on the screen. Richard cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, while we respect your concerns, these demands would require significant changes to how we operate. Our shareholders. Your shareholders will be far more concerned if I walk out of this room and announce to the press that Quantum is pulling $4 billion in funding because Sky United refused to address its discrimination problem, Marlene replied. The room fell silent. Marlene stood tall, her gaze steady, waiting for their response. This was the moment everything would either change or fall apart. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. Marlene stood at the window of her office, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. On her desk lay the latest report from Sky United Airlines, thick with data, photos, and testimonials. Her phone buzzed. It was a text message from Lynn. They're ready for the video call. Everyone's online. Marlene took a deep breath and walked to her conference room, where a large screen on the wall showed a virtual meeting room already filled with faces. Some were her own team members, others were from the airline. In the center square was Richard Wells, the airline CEO, looking noticeably different than when she first confronted him 6 months ago. The stress lines around his eyes had deepened, but there was something else too, a look of genuine engagement that hadn't been there before. Marlene, he greeted her with a nod. We're all here for the 6-month progress review. Thank you for making the time, she replied, settling into her chair. I've reviewed your report. Let's talk about what you've accomplished. A woman with short hair and glasses, the airline's newly appointed chief diversity officer, shared her screen and began walking through slides. As you can see, she explained, we've completed the first phase of retraining for all customer-facing staff. That's over 12,000 employees who've gone through the new program. The slides showed photos of training sessions led by civil rights experts Marlene's team had helped select. In one image, flight attendants participated in role-playing scenarios. In another, gate agents engaged in a group discussion led by a respected diversity consultant. The feedback has been surprisingly positive, the woman continued. Many staff members have told us they've wanted better tools for handling these situations for years. Richard chimed in. We've also restructured our complaint system, as you recommended. Every report of potential discrimination now goes directly to our independent review board. Marlene nodded. The review board had been one of her non-negotiable demands. A panel of outside experts who would evaluate incidents without the airline's influence. And what about the numbers? Marlene asked. Have you seen any change in actual incidents? A man in a navy blue suit shared a new set of charts. Reported incidents are down 62% compared to the same period last year. Customer satisfaction scores among passengers of color have improved by 41%. Marlene felt a small surge of satisfaction, but kept her expression professional. And the hiring initiatives? Richard's face grew more serious. That's been harder. We've increased diversity in our management training program by 35%, but changing the makeup of our executive team will take longer. We've created a clear pathway, though. Marlene wrote a note on her pad. I want to see more progress there by our next review. As the meeting continued, they discussed challenges and successes. The airline had replaced the security team that had been involved in Marlene's incident. They had created a new passenger bill of rights that was prominently displayed at every gate. Their advertisements now featured a much more diverse range of travelers. When the formal presentation ended, Richard asked the others to leave the call. Soon, only he and Marlene remained on screen. Off the record, he said, his voice quieter, I want to thank you. Marlene raised an eyebrow. For withholding $4 billion until you made changes. He shook his head. For not just walking away. You could have taken your money elsewhere and left us the same as we were. Instead, you forced us to become better. He paused, looking uncomfortable but determined. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I thought I understood everything about running an airline, but I had blind spots. Big ones. We all have blind spots, Marlene said. The question is what we do when someone points them out. After the call ended, Marlene walked back to her office window. 6 months ago, she had stood in this same spot, furious and humiliated after being pulled off that plane. Now she watched as a Sky United aircraft took off from the distant airport, its tail catching the sunlight. The airline was changing. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely changing. And it wasn't just Sky United. Other airlines had noticed the publicity around these reforms and had quietly begun implementing similar measures. Magazine articles had been written about the quantum effect on corporate accountability. Marlene smiled to herself. Sometimes change came from laws or protests, but sometimes it came from having the right leverage at the right moment and the courage to use it. 1 year to the day after being pulled off that flight, Marlene stood on a stage beside Richard Wells. Behind them, a banner stretched across the wall, announcing the Transportation Equity Initiative. Camera flashes lit up the room as journalists captured the moment. The black CEO of a major tech company and the white CEO of an airline, standing together in what had once seemed an unlikely alliance. Good morning, Marlene began, her voice carrying through the speakers to the packed audience. 1 year ago today, I was escorted off a Sky United flight because someone decided I didn't belong in first class. A murmur went through the crowd. The incident had become well known in business circles, but hearing her reference it so directly still had power. What happened next changed not just my relationship with this airline, but how we think about corporate accountability in America. She gestured toward the screens where images appeared showing the changes that had taken place over the past year. Diverse crews training together, new signage at airports emphasizing passenger rights, community meetings where airline staff listened to travelers' experiences. Today, I'm proud to announce that Quantum Innovations is not only reinstating our funding package for Sky United's fleet modernization. Marlene continued, we're increasing it to $4.5 billion. Applause broke out in the room. In the front row, Marlene's board members nodded in approval. They had unanimously supported the decision after seeing the airline's genuine commitment to change. Richard stepped forward to the microphone. When Ms. Johnson first presented us with her demands a year ago, I'll be honest, many in our company saw them as excessive. We worried about costs, about disruption, about shareholder reactions. He paused, looking out at the audience. We were wrong. The changes we've made haven't just improved the experiences of our passengers of color. They've improved service for everyone. Our customer satisfaction scores are at a 5-year high. Employee retention has improved. Even our stock price has benefited. A slide appeared showing the airline's rising performance metrics. Most importantly, Richard added, we've begun to build a company culture where everyone truly belongs, both our passengers and our employees. Marlene returned to the microphone. But we're not stopping there. Today, we're announcing the creation of the Transportation Equity Initiative. The screens changed to show a new logo and mission statement. This will be a jointly funded research and advocacy group dedicated to addressing discrimination in all forms of travel, not just air, but rail, rideshares, cruise lines, and more. The initiative will collect data, fund research, and provide grants to companies willing to examine and improve their practices. She looked out at the reporters scribbling notes. When I was pulled off that plane, I felt helpless for a moment. But I wasn't helpless. I had economic power. Not everyone has that advantage. This initiative is for them, for every traveler who has ever been made to feel they don't belong. After the press conference, Marlene found a quiet moment alone in a side room. She thought about the journey of the past year, from humiliation to transformation. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from friends and colleagues who had watched the announcement livestream. Lynn poked her head in the door. The reception is starting. Everyone's waiting for you. I'll be right there, Marlene said. As she gathered her things, she noticed a magazine on the table with her photo on the cover. The headline read, "How One Executive Changed an Industry." She picked it up and flipped through to find the article. The writer had interviewed dozens of people, airline employees, passengers, business experts, about the impact of what was now being called the Marlene Method, using economic leverage not just to punish companies for discrimination, but to partner with them in creating lasting change. The final paragraph caught her eye. Johnson could have simply taken her business elsewhere after being discriminated against. Instead, she chose the harder path of demanding genuine transformation. In doing so, she may have created a new model for how financial power can be used to address systemic problems in American business. Marlene closed the magazine and headed for the door. Outside, hundreds of people waited to hear more about the initiative that had grown from her moment of humiliation. As she walked toward the reception, she spotted a young black girl in the crowd, maybe 10 years old, watching her with wide, admiring eyes. Marlene smiled at her. That girl would grow up in a world where people who looked like them would be treated with a little more respect when they traveled. Not perfect, there was still so much work to do, but better. And sometimes, better was enough to build on.